Good evening. Tonight, an investigation into an American pastime and the big business that runs it. That business is Major League Baseball, and no country outside the United States produces more baseball talent than here in the Dominican Republic. Our story begins with a simple fact. The Dominican Republic is poor. In many rural areas, desperately poor. Education is required only through the 10th grade, but many children never go to school at all. If they work, it's in the growing tourism industry, or many live at home to help their parents in the fields. There was a time when the country's fertile soil was known for producing sugar and coffee. Now the fields are growing another lucrative export. Everywhere you look, you'll notice a constant: baseball. It's not a national pastime, it's a national passion.
We can practice baseball in any corner, even under the traffic lights. You can see people practicing baseball.
But baseball in the Dominican Republic is not a children's game. It's a business, big business. And once these kids grow a little older, some will become part of the biggest open market for baseball players in the world. With dreams of making it big in the U.S., like megastar Dominican athletes Pedro Martinez or David Ortiz. Many children see baseball as a chance to hit the jackpot in a land with almost no other economic opportunities. In the Dominican Republic, baseball dollars can be seen everywhere, and kids will sacrifice anything to get them.
The majority of the kids have no way of getting out of poverty. They're dropping out of school, and the only way that they can buy a home for their family, the only way that they can live decently, is to try to sign a major league contract. And it's all money.
Money. More than stardom, more than fame, and more than the game. It's an economy that's driven by survival, and it begins at a very young age. There is evidence to suggest that cases like Maya's are hardly rare, and that the problem is not limited to a particular religion or country of origin. From London's Indian Sikh neighborhood of Southall to the large Pakistani Muslim community in the small northern city of Blackburn, old cultural practices do not seem to be fading, even within families who have been in England for generations. A government-commissioned study in 2008 was used by politicians to suggest that there could be as many as 4,000 forced marriages in Britain each year.
There is something fundamentally wrong here in Britain, where in 21st century Britain, we are still dealing with the barbaric practice of forced marriage. These are British-born subjects. I thought Britain stood for democracy, independence, and all those things. You know, we're not talking about some third world country out there. This is England.
Jasvinder Sangara runs a charity call center that offers advice on avoiding forced marriages or escaping abusive family relationships. The mostly volunteer team here at Karma Nirvana fielded more than 4,800 calls in 2010. The callers here are often young and desperate women. Most are British citizens. The collection of clippings Jasvinder displays here is a constant reminder of the real danger of forced marriage faced by some children. Parents might even take them overseas to marry foreign men eager for British visas. In the callers' voices, Jasvinder often hears a version of her own story.
I myself am a survivor of a forced marriage. I was born here in England. I don't know any other country bar England. This is home. I've never been to India. That's an alien country to me. I'm a British-born subject. I went to school here. But when I was at school here in the UK, I watched the majority of my sisters being taken out of British schools when they were 15 years old to marry strangers they had only ever met in photographs. They would disappear to the Punjab of India, come back as somebody's wife and daughter-in-law, and nobody in school blinked an eyelid and nobody asked any questions about their absence. When it was my turn, I was 14 and my mother presented me with a photograph of the man she told me I was promised to when I was 8 years old. And this is the first I've heard of it. But I also knew it was highly probable because I'd watched it happen to my sisters. I said no. I'm not marrying this man, Mum. I want to go to school, I want to get an education, and dare I say, even go to college or university. My family took me out of school when I was 15 years old. And I remember as clear as day, my father walking me up to my bedroom, putting a lock on the door and being held a prisoner in that room for weeks on end and not being allowed to leave the room until I agreed to the marriage.
Eventually, Jasvinder consented to the marriage, but as soon as she was let out of her room, she fled. When she called her mother, pleading to return, the response was devastating.
She said, from this day forward, you have two choices. You either come home and marry the man we've promised you to because you will not dishonor this family, or from this day forward you are now dead in our eyes. And that's a picture of me when I was, how old was I there? 9 years old. And I'd already been promised to somebody in marriage in that picture. And that's my younger sister, who's a year and a half younger than me, and she was forced to marry the man that I was promised to. That was the only way my family could claim some of the honour back.
From where most of us live our daily lives, the northern slope of Alaska is literally at the end of the earth. Its ice floes, blowing snow, and frigid waters seem at first glance to be a forbidding and barren landscape. But this is the scene of a red-hot battle between two groups who see the same icy seas from very different vantage points. That's because this summer, for the first time ever, oil drilling is scheduled for the Arctic waters off this coast. On the one side are a hardy indigenous people who have called this place home for millennia and, backed by conservationists, want to keep it as untouched as possible. But big change may be coming. Petroleum companies estimate there's 12 billion barrels worth of oil below the ice and sea. They've argued for years that they can bring it to market safely. And in 2008, under President George W. Bush, they were given the right to begin drilling. That was the story we went to report in early April this year when reporter-cameraman Lucian Reed traveled to one of the northernmost villages in the United States. At the time, no one knew that perhaps the worst oil spill in history was only a few days away. The only way to get here is by air. This single airstrip is the sole physical link between the 800 or so residents of the town of Point Hope, Alaska, and the rest of the world. There's debate about it, but many historians believe that human beings first came from Asia to North America over the Bering Strait 25,000 years ago, and that this was one of the first places they settled.
Not many people know this, but this place here has been known as the longest continuously inhabited region in North America, and a lot of people don't believe it because it's hard to swallow. How can a brown, small person keep such a land that's so rich for so long? The natives here were so gritty and so strong that protective of this region.
Local resident of Point Hope, Robert Gallahorn, says his people have survived in this unforgiving climate for countless generations. And he told us there's a long history of outsiders coming to extract the resources here with little benefit to the locals. The local economy here is virtually non-existent. Residents eke out a life that is lived partly in modern-day America and partly in the echoes of their traditional past. They rely on a subsistence hunting for their survival. That means a strong attachment to the land, and even more profoundly, the open water.
We use the ocean. The ocean provides for our people. And our customs and our culture revolves around the whale. It's our livelihood, our spirit. That's who we are.
Did she say ain't or isn't?
May Hank is a mother, grandmother, and tribal leader who for years has been heading the fight to keep drilling out of the surrounding ocean.
The ocean is our garden. If anything happens to it, you know, that's like 80% of our traditional food.
There's beluga, caribou soup, and seal oil. Dana puts them in that small little bowl there for dipping the seal meat. I mean the caribou in. This is real good with honey mustard.
This long heritage of living from the ocean is what older generations worry will be lost if drilling comes to these shores. Point Hope sits on a little finger of land jutting out from Alaska's northwest coast, not all that far from Russia. To the north is the Chukchi Sea. In 2008, the Bush administration opened up the sea to oil and gas bidding, and the Shell Oil Company paid over $2 billion for the lease rights to several areas, drawing strong protest. In September 2009, more than 400 scientists from around the globe signed a letter to President Obama saying the Arctic Ocean is one of the least understood regions on Earth, and that the decisions to grant oil leasing rights were made without sufficient scientific understanding of the consequences. Then, earlier this year, the Government Accountability Office criticized the federal government's environmental studies that allowed the lease sale to go forward. President Obama canceled future lease auctions in the Chukchi Sea and other parts of Alaska, but the administration allowed the sales already finalized to remain intact, to the dismay of the people in Point Hope.
When Obama got in, we had high hopes, but as it always turns out, the pressure of oil development is always an issue.
Even after the recent oil spill in the Gulf, the Shell Oil Company is still planning to drill exploratory wells this summer in Alaska. But the people of Point Hope are not giving up. They've formed study groups, participated in pending lawsuits, and lobbied Washington. This meeting at City Hall is part of a Native Alaskan organization trying to restrict oil exploration in the state.
Once industry gets the foot in the door, that's how they operate. Their objective is just to continue to expand for profit. We're trying to protect what's left, because the places that the industry are targeting right now are subsistence use lands and waters of our peoples.
If there's one rallying cry in Point Hope, it's Save the Whales, but not as an environmental tagline. The whale hunt is a ritual ingrained in the native culture. Migrating whales pass closely by the shores, and a good year's hunt can help sustain the population through a winter. More than just a source of food, though, the animals carry a spiritual and cultural significance that affects every part of life. Celebrations that honor the hunt are held at 2 sites in the town, and whale bones mark the graves at the local cemetery, the large jaw bones for deceased whaling captains.
This is my first whale right there. That's Sally, Isaac, and Jonah. And this is my crew right there. When I first catch my whale, I was so happy that I couldn't believe it. You feel like a king. You feel like a king, you know?
Isaac Killavook is a whaling captain who allowed us to accompany his crew at the start of the spring whaling season. Not much has changed over the years. Sealskin-covered canoes are still used with harpoons thrown by hand. The weather has to be just right, and the men patient, as waits can be long for the whales to swim by in the right way. Robert Gallahorn was also on Isaac's crew.
If you feel that animal respects you, you'll feel better about hunting it. You know, it's not like you gotta go out and I gotta shoot that and I gotta shoot that and I gotta shoot that and I'll just take that and leave the rest. The animals know if you're that kind of a hunter.
As indigenous peoples who have lived off whale meat for thousands of years, the native Alaskans here are allowed to eat and hunt a few of the animals, according to international treaty. While the men watch for whales, there is very little talking, just the sound of the wind and the water. When a whale is sighted, the men jump into the boat and paddle out with their harpoons. The boat gets close to the whale and the hunter strikes. If you look closely, you may see an orange buoy in the middle of your screen. It is attached to the harpoon, and when it starts to shake, that means the whale has been hit, but this one gets away. The hunters must be careful in how they hunt, because not only are they limited in the number of whales they can land, they are limited in the number of whales they can even strike with a harpoon. And this day provides a lesson in the reason why. Even if a whale gets away, it may have been fatally struck. A few days after the hunt, a pilot saw a dead whale floating in the ocean not far away. Over the 2 weeks we were there, that was the only whale that was hit. Every other hunt came up empty. This hunting season will continue, but the men out here worry that exploratory drilling this summer will change the path of the whale migration away from their shores.
If our animals start diverting their path or they don't want to come past Point Hope because of oil drilling, we'll be just another people on the streets that's looking for a handout because we can't hunt no more because the animals won't come to us. I have to have money. Yes, sir. I have a job. Yes, sir. I do need that. But that's all secondary compared to who I am. If I lose my identity as an Alaskan Native, if I lose that, I am nothing. I am nobody.
Economic opportunity is just one of their things they say they would provide for the communities. And in the past 30 years, what we've seen with economic opportunities is maybe 3 to 5 out of our community will be able to get jobs. For me to believe economic opportunities, no, I don't see it. We never see it.
It's less than a week after the oil rig caught fire in the Gulf of Mexico, and May Hank is packing for a trip to Washington, D.C. to join a delegation of Native Alaskans. It's a critical time. Drilling in Alaska is set to begin in a couple of months. The Gulf of Mexico oil spill is on everyone's mind. Now the Native Alaskans believe is their best opportunity to stop exploration. They've asked for, and been granted, a meeting with the White House.
Wow. Which side would be better to sit? See the water. There's a lot of people in other communities. A lot of them are too quiet because, you know, that's the way they were taught and raised, is to not get vocal and harsh. But, you know, you have to start doing it. Because if you don't, there's no way you'd be able to protect your lifestyle. We can still say as people, as Inupiaq, that we oppose it.
In Washington, the delegation is joined by representatives from the Alaska Wilderness League, an environmental nonprofit that is funding the trip. Peter Van Tine is an environmental attorney working on their case.
Anything he can do to help us stop the exploration in 2010 is what we're after.
Our cameras were not allowed into their first meeting of the day at the Department of the Interior, but with the Gulf of Mexico crisis deepening, the delegation knows that offshore oil drilling has suddenly become issue number one in Washington.
The Gulf of Mexico oil spill is a very significant event, and you know, it really is going to take some time to deal with, and they're appropriately focused on that. But we have a lot to learn from that oil spill before any similar activity should be allowed in the Arctic. And that's the message that these folks delivered to the Secretary's office today. Time will tell whether or not they're going to take those lessons and really see them for the Arctic.
The group has an ally in its next meeting, Washington State Representative Jay Inslee.
The science is totally unknown, and that's why I just do not think it makes sense to go into these very, very sensitive waters, because an oil spill up here, we have no idea how to deal with it.
Then, the biggest meeting of the day. The delegation finally makes its case directly to the White House, sitting down with administration representatives for environmental and Native American affairs. George Edwardson, president of the regional tribal government in northern Alaska, pled their case.
And this is the migratory path of the bowhead whales. And 23 endangered species animals use this as a migratory path. We desperately need your help. And we need to put a stop to this.
It's been a week since they started the spill, and just imagine that being under all our ocean ice. Right now, our ocean off the coastline is all covered with ice. There's a whole blanket of it. There's no way they can clean it under the ocean ice. And, you know, if that is taken away from us, you take away who we are.
Thank you. Thanks.
Despite the assurances, the delegation has no way of knowing whether their message will help sway the administration to rethink leases in the Chukchi Sea. But the mood after the meetings was hopeful.
Before the day's over, Obama will have heard what we have said. And that is the first time and the only time we've ever had this ability. I've been a president as a regional tribal government for finishing 18 years. And this year is the first time I can rightfully say, yes, I did reach the president.
My perspective of the Western society is that they tend to destroy lands and oceans. Look at history with the Indians down south in lower 48. You know, what did they ever gain from all of that? They never did.
We are the last survivors. I say no in my traditional way. You can't touch it. That's our survival. Please let me hunt while I still can.